Our News on Terror segment tonight. New National Security Advisor General H.R. McMaster held his first all-hands staff meeting last week, where he reassured staff that he would not carry out a witch hunt within the administration. These comments run counter to a recent New York Times report claiming that McMaster is pursuing a massive reorganization of the president's national security team. Instead, McMaster plans to focus his efforts on a vast departure from the Obama administration's foreign policy vision. With me now from the Washington Free Beacon, Adam Kredo. Adam, hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks for having me.
Adam, this is pretty interesting, I think. A lot of people, I think, imagined or thought or anticipated that General McMaster would purge General Flynn's handpicked staff here for the national security team, and he assured the existing staff that he was not going to do that.
Yeah, I think that was the main concern to many people that had been Flynn loyalists and a lot of people that came into the administration mainly because of Flynn. He really had built a team and didn't have nearly enough time to carry out what he wanted to with that team. So I think the view among many senior NSC officials and other in the administration was that McMaster would come in and kind of clean house and clean shop, so to speak. But in fact, he told them very clearly during this first all-hands meeting, as you mentioned, that that's not his goal. He's not out to carry out a witch hunt here. I don't think that that's productive for anybody, and it especially will not help the Trump administration carry out the national security vision of the president if they're too busy getting rid of staff and bringing in new people this late into the first term.
Right, and I think there was some heightened drama here, too, because Harward, who was offered the position before McMaster, he turned it down because he said he wouldn't work on the same team as KT McFarland, according to reports at least, and Trump wasn't willing to let KT McFarland go. So what does this exactly mean then? Aside from McFarland, I mean, can we expect Steve Bannon to still be involved in on the National Security Council? Because that's received a lot of criticism, too.
It has, and I think we will still see Steve as a part of that. Now, the NSC is operating on a day-to-day basis. The White House also has an interesting infrastructure where Bannon and others actually kind of operate what appears to be an in-house think tank, that is longer-term strategy and policy goals, while the NSC is kind of nimble responding to that flow of information that's coming in on a daily basis. I think that's actually an interesting way to work a White House, particularly on the foreign policy front, and it could serve them well, to be honest.
Right, I think that speaks to President Trump's business experience. That sounds like something you would do when you run a large multinational corporation, more so than the White House. But it'll be interesting to see. Adam, one of the things, I absolutely love to hear this about General McMaster. My estimation of him grew exponentially when I heard that he gave a reading list, a list of books to his staff and said, this is an example better than I can tell you myself of what my philosophy is going to be leading you. I mean, incredible books on this list.
Yeah, some really interesting reading aside from his own works. He also included Trump's work, and I don't think I mentioned it in the article I wrote, but one of the sources I spoke to said that he focused particularly on chapter 2 of Trump's book, and that is about not entangling yourself in kind of this effort to get credit, but letting the work speak for itself. I think that's very different from the Obama NSC, which really was about boosting personalities, whereas Trump does not want to see that, and McMaster does not want to see that. Other very good reading on there about the history of Vietnam and the quagmire for the U.S. there, the history of lessons learned from World War I, and other works by former officials in the Reagan administration, W. Bush, and Bush I administration. So I think a lot of long-term thinking and a lot of thinking that breaks away from the Obama administration and their sense that this is a new era. We are the new kids on the block, and we look forward but not back. I think we've all learned from that foreign policy experience over the past 8 years that when you do not look back at history, you find yourself in a very large problem like we have now in the world.
Right, and I particularly liked, I mean, you mentioned the World War I, the glance back at history. It's actually an essay. It's not a full book by Margaret Macmillan. I mean, that's incredible. That gives me so much confidence. I've read that essay. That gives me so much confidence in General McMaster because it really examines why we go to war and making sure that it's a very deliberate, very necessary action for us to take so that we don't accidentally get entangled in, a worldwide conflict like arguably World War I was. Absolutely incredible philosophical philosophical mind. Adam, one of the funnier ones was from Zachary Stone, though. This book was recommended. It's called Blunder: Why Smart People Make Bad Decisions. I mean, that's just funny to me because we are human. I mean, we make mistakes, but you got to be careful, especially when you have so much power that you're doing the right thing and that you can avoid it at all costs. That one's funny.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. And one of the sources that I spoke to on the NSC actually laughed in recounting to me him mentioning that book and said to me, I think in a very candid moment, this source said, I actually found that very reassuring because, again, it seemed like a break from the Obama administration that in some ways and respects felt itself untouchable and could do no wrong in the world. And in fact, McMaster is somebody who realizes that, well, we do make mistakes and let's try our best not to. I find that very clever.
Right, and I mean, preparing the way he is and looking at it philosophically, that really is the best way that we can prepare and not make mistakes or not make hasty decisions, which so often in national security, leads to loss of life. Adam, we're almost out of time, but very quickly, compare what you think national security for our nation will look like under McMaster compared to Flynn.
Look, I think the overarching ideology of the Trump administration will not change. The way it's carried out on a day-to-day basis might, but I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I think that we're going to continue to do things like reel in the Iran deal and renegotiate aspects of that deal that are lacking. I think we're going to continue to make an effort to get closer with our allies such as Israel and others in the Middle East region that for a long time have had chilly relations. I think moving the embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem is still a priority. So none of these big overarching things, kind of the 50,000-foot macro perspective, that's not going to change. It's going to be just kind of day-to-day, the way we focus on things in the NSC. So I would urge people not to be too worried as kind of the New York Times and these other newspapers have rushed to highlight disarray and these types of things and panic in the White House. My sense is it doesn't exist, and I've spoken with multiple people over there in the past days.
General McMaster himself said that that didn't exist, that he didn't come into his new position and find that to be the case with his team. That's actually one of the reasons he said why he was keeping the team, because they weren't in disarray. They were very organized. It seems to me maybe just a personality difference in the leadership here, less bombastic than General Flynn McMaster seems to be.
I agree.
Adam, thanks so much for being here. It was great to talk to you.